All right, and welcome to our Northampton Community Television audience. Once again, this is Rick Haggerty, kicking it for peace, culture, and education, airing each Sunday morning, 8 to 10 a.m. right here on Valley Free Radio, 103.3 FM, Northampton. And good morning, Bruce.
Good morning, Rick. How you doing?
All right, man. What a great article, and thanks so much for calling in this morning. And this is the woman who said no, and this... Maggie Chase, that is, has a great story. Why don't you introduce it for us? And I loved the article.
Okay, well, I actually have two among my 50 or so articles. I generally avoid politics, as I've often said. I'm sick of it. And perhaps some of your listeners are too. But at any rate, occasionally something comes up. I do have a couple politician articles. One is the woman who said no to war, which is about Jeanette Rankin. The Montana congresswoman who happened to have been in office at both the beginning of World War I and World War II, and in both cases, as a pacifist, voted against the war, and in both cases paid the price, political price, but it was a remarkable story of principle. But this is, under the same title, similar, the woman who said no to McCarthy. That's Joe McCarthy. Washington, D.C. A bully was stalking the nation's capital, insulting people, ruining reputations, using fear to bend Congress to his will. Behind the scenes, many said someone should stand up for American values, speak to the American people. Margaret Chase Smith had served 4 terms in the House, but was just a year in the Senate. Yet many in Washington considered her a likely vice presidential candidate on the GOP ticket in 1952. But in those days, she recalled, freshman senators were to be seen and not heard, like good children. When Joseph McCarthy produced a list of 205 communists in government, Smith listened. It looked as though Joe was on to something disturbing and frightening, she said. But then she studied the documents McCarthy offered as evidence, and she saw no evidence. At first she wavered. I'm not a lawyer, she thought. After all, Joe was a lawyer, and any lawyer senator will tell you that lawyer senators are superior to non-lawyer senators. Surely, she hoped, one of the Democrats would take the Senate floor. But when no challenge came, she remembered, it became evident that Joe had the Senate paralyzed with fear. Back in Skowhegan, Maine, folks knew Maggie Chase. Her father was a barber. Her mother worked in shoe factories. Maggie went straight from high school into teaching and then journalism. Only when she married her publisher, Clyde Smith, did she enter politics, accompanying Mr. Smith to Washington when he was elected to Congress during the New Deal. When he died 4 years later, she won a special election. Then she won 4 elections on her own, racking up 60 to 70% of the vote. Though beloved in Maine, in Congress, Smith was known more for her attire than her expertise. Nattily dressed in dark colors, she always wore a red rose in her lapel. And that was about all Congress expected from the junior senator from Maine. But then she gave Congress a lesson in integrity. As McCarthy grilled one accused communist after another, Smith began to speak out. The American people, she wrote in her nationally syndicated column, need, quote, written evidence in black and white instead of conflicting oral outbursts in nebulous hues of red and pink. But the grilling continued. Finally, on June 1st, 1950, as Smith boarded the Senate tram, Joe McCarthy approached. Margaret, he said, you look very serious. Are you going to make a speech? Smith remained unfluttered as the rose in her lapel. Yes, she said, and you will not like it. McCarthy asked if the speech was about him. She replied, yes, but I'm not going to mention your name. Remember, Margaret, he said, I control Wisconsin's 27 convention votes. Vice presidential nomination? 10 minutes later, she sat on the Senate floor, 3 rows in front of McCarthy. This is awful, she said, turning to her aide. I'm new here, not only a new member of the Senate, but a woman. And I'm getting up and telling that Republican crowd. Her aide reminded her, you came in with a whole whale of a vote from Maine. They have great confidence in you. And so she rose to deliver her declaration of conscience. Mr. President, I would like to speak briefly and simply about a serious national condition. It is a national feeling of fear and frustration that could result in national suicide and the end of everything that we Americans hold dear. She spoke for 15 minutes. She spoke, quote, as a Republican, as a woman, as a United States Senator, but also as an American. Her words echoed through the chamber. Selfish political opportunism, a forum for hate and character assassination. The American people, she said, are sick and tired of being afraid to speak their minds. The American people are sick and tired of seeing innocent people smeared. A Republican victory was sorely needed, she said, but I do not want to see the Republican Party ride to victory on the four horsemen of calumny: fear, ignorance, bigotry, and smear. Smith expected McCarthy to rise in his defense, but he sat, as the New York Times noted, white and silent, hardly 3 feet behind her. Then, without a word, he walked out. Smith accepted congratulations from a few senators, not as many she hoped. Then business as usual resumed. The press was divided. Praise from the Times and the Washington Post, attacks from the right. Yet Mail from Maine backed her by 8-1. And financier Bernard Baruch said, if a man had made the Declaration of Conscience, he would be the next president of the United States. 3 weeks after Smith's speech, when the Korean War broke out, her political nightmare shifted into high gear. McCarthy booted Smith off his committee, and there was no more talk of the vice presidency. Finally, 3 years later, in 1953, broadcaster Edward R. Murrow finally picked up the gauntlet thrown down by Margaret Chase Smith. Murrow's See It Now program showed the senator bullying, snickering, making utterly false charges. Murrow concluded with a promise: we will not be driven by fear into an age of unreason, not if we dig deep in our history and our doctrine and remember that we are not descended from fearful men, nor from fearful women. Draw your own conclusions.
Wow, what a great story, and for a woman at that time to just step up and be heard is just absolutely groundbreaking. It
was really remarkable, and she I remember her as, I'm going to date myself again, as I always do here, but I remember when she ran for president in 1964, she was a dark horse candidate, so to speak, against Barry Goldwater, and really didn't get anywhere. But she was the first woman to really, first woman in office to make a serious run, and she was quite a principled person.
Yeah, very outstanding. And if you just tuned in, folks, we're speaking with Bruce Watson, and he's just presenting, and we're talking about an article from his online news magazine, The Attic, for a Kinder, Cooler America. And today's article, The Woman Who Said No to McCarthy. And you can go to theattic.space and read up on Bruce's articles. Now, this whole, smear campaign, we're seeing it even today. Anybody who, opposes this administration is downright, smeared and, discredited and everything else, when they're the ones that should be, they're discrediting themselves day by day, this current administration. But it is really a smear campaign, and that we're seeing today. So this is not just something that happened in the 50s, running on fear and all that, paralyzing our congressmen. I mean, we're looking at horrible, mass murders going on around the country, in schools and other places, concert venues, clubs, and no one is standing up. Everyone seems to be paralyzed by the NRA, so.
Well, I think that, I noticed, that is definitely true, and they're not smearing anybody, but they've got the ballot box controlled. I'm more, when I talk about a bully stalking the nation's capital, of course, I'm talking about McCarthy, but I think we know who the bully is these days, insulting people, ruining reputations.
Yeah, absolutely.
Here to ban Congress to as well. We don't even have to mention his name here, do we?
Absolutely.
So my message was more to suggest that what's most shocking about all that is the utter reluctance of his own party now and back in 1950 to say a word about it. And even now, after the election, I'm surprised. I thought after the election, it's something of a blue wavelet, there would be more people saying, yeah, he's a liability and we need to speak out against him, but nothing has changed.
Absolutely. Now let's talk a little bit about your website, theattic.space, because I see just a bunch of really cool articles here. And Helen Keller's Moment, Treat Me in St. Louis, The Tower of Watts. How about talking about some of your front page articles that we can get drum up some interest for folks to get out there to the Attic?
Okay, the Attic is, as I say, it's not generally political. It's supposed to be an antidote, really, to the dire and depressing politics. It started on the day that, on Inauguration Day 2 years ago, almost And so, therefore, with weekly updates, has close to 100 articles on it. I think I've taken some down. So this week's is Helen Keller's moment. Do we not all recall seeing that moment at the well in the movie The Miracle Worker? And if you've never seen it, it has lost none of its power. So I decided to look into, well, what really happened? Was that true? Did she, suddenly realize, the deaf, dumb, and blind girl, that her teacher was spelling out the word water to her? And I was surprised how accurate, both how moving Helen Keller's account of it is in her Story of My Life, but also that movie was very accurate, almost everything. And so I have the story told from her point of view, from Anne Sullivan's point of view, and I also have a clip from The Miracle Worker.
Is that, by the way, is that Patty Duke in that role?
Duke, unbelievable performance. I think she was the youngest person to win an Oscar at that time. Still an unbelievable performance. And then last week I did, finishing up Food Month in the Attic, I did Treat Me in St. Louis, which was how the 1904 St. Louis Fair, there are a lot of myths around that World's Fair. None of the foods that we think of as being introduced there were, but they were all popularized there, and that includes hot dogs, ice cream cones, hamburgers, peanut butter, cotton candy, Jell-O, and on and on. So it was a fascinating...
The jiggly, fruity gelatin, right? Jell-O.
Yeah, it's sort of America's first food court. And so that was a fun event. And then I have an old one that
So wait, can I just ask, the ice cream rolled up in a waffle, was that the birth of the ice cream cone?
Yes, that's...
Oh, nice, nice. I love that.
It's not true. In almost all cases, historians have found earlier references to all of these things. But it was the first place that it really came together and were enjoyed by people. And I pulled one out of my past here from one of my favorite places in America, the Watts Towers. A lot of people don't know about these fantastic, ornate, sandcastle-like iron towers in Southern California in the district of Watts, built the largest structure ever built by a single man, 100 feet high. He spent 30 years doing it in his backyard, Simon Rodia. Beautiful pictures. It's an amazing place. Probably the best, most staggering work of folk art in America, and so I've retold that story, the Towers of Watts.
That's it. That's crazy. Like all these little tiles that are, colorful tiles that are part of the structure, both on some of the, So folks really have to go to the attic.space and check out some of these articles. And it's, there's so much to learn about America and the people of America, and you're bringing it to our attention, and in a very eloquent and rich way. So it's much appreciated. I really love this stuff, and so happy to have you, as a regular contributor to my show. And folks can can subscribe there as well, right? It doesn't cost anything. They certainly can donate as well, but get a subscription. And I have one, and I get, maybe an email a week? It's nothing.
One a week.
Yeah, one a week,
I think we all know how besieged we are by emails. I promise one email a week. It comes every Sunday morning at 7:30. Gives you the new article and preview of what's going to be next week, and sometimes something else, a list or something like that.
Yeah, and the email I got was Helen Keller's moment, so we'll have to all go out and watch The Miracle Worker and catch that. I definitely want to check that out. So any closing thoughts? Anything else you'd like to say before we've got about another minute or so? And you mentioned you're getting into food as well, right? I see 10 great restaurants. And
one of the ones I did on food was on our own Northampton, Steve Harrell, a couple weeks ago, as the Emperor of Ice Cream. Interesting story about how Steve of Harrell's invented modern gourmet ice cream back in the 70s in Somerville. That was one. Next week I'm going to cover one of my favorite movies, City Lights, and how Charlie Chaplin overcame the death of his mother and the Depression and the talkie revolution to make a movie that I can just never see enough.
Yeah, what a great actor and performer, just phenomenal. Yeah, I'll have to check that one out as well. Okay, so again, folks can go to theattic.space and check out Bruce Watson's online news magazine, The Attic, for a Kinder and Cooler America. Bruce, thank you so much for for calling in, and we'll talk to you next week.
Okay, talk to you next week, Rick.
All right, man. Thank you. All right, so that is Bruce Watson, and so happy to have him with us. And again, I want to say thank you to our Northampton Community Television audience. Folks should go to NCTV, channels 12 and 23 and other stations, but they can go there to catch the show. And thank you to Bruce and Jen and Al Williams and everybody else up there. Thank you so much.